Trish recently exposed Marquez once again, and this time the situation has gotten even messier. She has been speaking out, sharing her side of the story, and trying to convince people that Marquez is not being truthful, not stepping up, and not meeting the requirements set by the court. But just as quickly as she shared her story, Marquez came forward with his own response, armed with what he calls receipts, and ready to clear up what he believes are nothing more than lies. This back and forth has created confusion for many people watching, because on one side you have Trish telling her version with so much conviction, and on the other side, Marquez is claiming that the truth is very different. From the start, Trish wanted to make it clear that visitation and custody are not the same. She seemed upset that people were misunderstanding what she was trying to say when she posted about the court awarding visitation. According to her, the paperwork actually shows joint custody with visitation terms, but she argued that custody and visitation have different meanings. And while it is true that visitation and custody do not mean the exact same thing, the point still left people wondering why she was focusing on that detail instead of the bigger picture. Many felt she was twisting the language to make it look like Marquez's role was less than what the court had outlined. Then came Trish's stronger claims. She alleged that Marquez had to jump through several hoops before even being allowed to have visitation. She claimed that the court required him to secure a home in his own name, with utilities attached to him, and that he had to live in that space for at least 60 days before overnight visits could even begin. On top of that, she said Marquez needed to pass 3 consecutive drug tests. Trish even claimed that the reason for this requirement was because Marquez had come into court high on weed. According to her, the judge directly asked him what would show up in his system if he were tested on the spot, and Marquez allegedly admitted to smoking weed. That allegation shocked many people, because if it were true, it would be one of the most careless moves a parent could make when fighting for custody or visitation. Coming to court under the influence, especially in a state where marijuana is not legal, would look irresponsible in front of a judge and could damage any custody case. But here's where the story becomes complicated. Trish said all of this with confidence, but she offered no transcripts or direct court records to back it up. So once again, people were left with nothing but her word to rely on. Marquez wasted no time responding. He flatly denied being high in court. He explained that he no longer smokes and that Trish was simply making up another story to damage his reputation. He did admit that he wasn't sure if everything was completely out of his system at that point, but he strongly pushed back on the claim that he walked into a courtroom while high. To him, this was nothing more than another one of Trish's tactics to make him look bad. And many people started to see that his response carried weight, because what kind of father who genuinely wants to fight for visitation with his child would jeopardize that by walking into a courtroom under the influence? Marquez also addressed another part of Trish's story. According to her, he told the court he was unemployed but owned a business, which she used to paint him as irresponsible and incapable of supporting their child. She even told the judge that she had paid $8,200 in dance fees, not including travel and food, and that Marquez hadn't contributed anything except for a small amount given on television. Trish framed this as proof that she has been carrying the entire financial burden while Marquez avoided responsibility, but Marquez came back with receipts. He presented screenshots of transactions, showing that he had in fact been giving money. According to the evidence he shared, he had given about $6,000 to his son and another $4,000 directly to Trish through Cash Apps. That totaled around $10,000, which completely contradicted Trish's statement that he had not given a dime. Even though the exact dates of those payments weren't clearly laid out, the fact that receipts existed at all put a big dent in Trish's claims. This is where the situation gets interesting. If Trish was correct, then Marquez was not contributing at all. But the receipts he provided showed otherwise. This left many people questioning why she would say he hasn't paid anything when there was proof that he had sent money. Was it because she felt he hadn't paid enough? Was it because she wanted to frame herself as the sole provider? Or was it just her way of trying to strengthen her case in the court of public opinion? One of Marquez's strongest points came when he reminded people of Trish's history. He called out her past inconsistencies, reminding everyone how she first claimed not to know Martel, then admitted she did, then changed her story again. According to him, she has always been unreliable with her words, and it made no sense for people to suddenly take everything she says as truth now. That was one of the clearest moments in his response, and many people agreed. Trish's past lies and contradictions made her less credible, and Marquez used that history to push back hard against her recent claims. As for the drug testing issue, Marquez explained that Trish was the one pushing the judge to require drug testing. Not because it was necessary, but because she wanted to make things harder for him. He described it as a spiteful move, saying she demanded he pass 3 drug tests before overnight visits were allowed. This, he said, was her way of dragging out the process and creating more obstacles for him. He pointed out that he was working on securing a new lease in Huntsville and that the issue of housing and utilities would be solved within weeks. To him, the story Trish was telling about him being unstable was misleading and exaggerated. But beyond all of these points, the financial part of the debate stood out the most. Trish said he hasn't paid anything, while Marquez showed receipts of thousands of dollars. If those receipts were real and accurate, then Trish's credibility takes a major hit. Because no matter how much she may feel he hasn't paid enough, saying he hasn't paid anything at all becomes a flat-out lie. And that is where many people began to see the cracks in her story. At the same time, Marquez's receipts raised their own questions. Were those payments recent, or were they stretched out over a long period of time? If they were old transactions, then Trish may still feel that he hasn't been consistently supporting their child. That's where the truth probably lies, somewhere in the middle. Maybe Marquez has been giving money, but not as much or as consistently as Trish believes he should. Maybe Trish exaggerated the story to make her point stronger. Either way, the facts don't completely support her claim that he hasn't given a dime. The other major issue in the story is how both sides use their platforms. Trish tends to make bold statements, often dramatic and emotional, while Marquez comes back with a more defensive but calculated approach. This difference in style makes Trish's version sound convincing at first, but once Marquez shares his receipts, people start to question why she left out those details. It becomes a battle of perception, with both of them trying to convince the public that their side is the truth. When you step back and look at it, one thing is clear. Neither side is completely innocent. Trish may exaggerate and twist the story to suit her narrative, but Marquez is not perfect either. His own history and choices have opened the door for these accusations in the first place. But what stands out the most in this entire back and forth is how much of it is less about their child and more about winning the argument against each other. The child at the center of this case deserves stability, consistency, and parents who can work together without tearing each other down. Yet, what we are seeing is 2 adults caught up in proving the other wrong. Trish frames herself as the victim who carries all the weight, while Marquez frames himself as the father who is being lied on and disrespected. The real truth likely exists somewhere between both of their versions, but the public is left trying to piece it together based on what each one chooses to share, and that brings us back to the question, who is really telling the truth? If we go by Trish's words, Marquez is unstable, unemployed, irresponsible, and unfit. If we go by Marquez's words, Trish is a liar who exaggerates, manipulates, and tries to block his relationship with their child. But when we look at the receipts, it seems clear that Trish's version left out important details, while Marquez's version seems more supported by evidence. Still, even with receipts, Marquez has work to do. He needs to continue proving that he can provide a stable home, maintain steady income, and meet all the requirements of the court. And if he truly no longer smokes, then passing drug tests should not be a problem for him. On the other hand, Trish needs to realize that exaggerating or twisting the story doesn't help her credibility. If she wants people to believe her, she has to tell the full truth, not just the part that makes her look good. This whole situation shows how toxic divorce and custody battles can become. Instead of focusing on what's best for the child, both sides are locked in a battle of control, power, and image. The court documents tell one story, social media tells another, and the child in the middle is the one who suffers the most. In the end, Trish's words may sound powerful, but Marquez's receipts carry weight. And receipts often speak louder than emotions. Whether people choose to believe her or him, the truth is that both have responsibilities, both have made mistakes, and both need to do better. Until then, this drama will continue, with each side trying to one-up the other in the court of public opinion.